Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. This time we're going to be digging into B2Gold's third quarter 2024 performance.
Always interesting to see how these gold miners are handling the markets.
Definitely. And, you sent over some excerpts from this Junior Mining Network article, and there's a lot to unpack here.
Yeah, there's a lot in there.
We're going to try to go beyond just the numbers, really get to what's going on with B2Gold and what these results might mean for their future.
Absolutely.
So let's just jump right into it with their production numbers. B2Gold produced 180,553 ounces of gold this quarter. Now, that might sound like a lot to someone outside the industry.
It is.
But it actually fell short of their initial projections.
That's right. And it's interesting because it's kind of company-wide.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't just one specific mine. It was across all their operations.
So kind of a mixed bag then with how their different mines performed.
Yeah, a bit of a mixed bag. Fekola mine in Mali, which is usually one of their, top performers, face some unexpected setbacks. But then on the positive side, their Masbate mine in the Philippines and Otjikoto mine in Namibia actually exceeded expectations.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Fekola. What happened there? Why the struggles this quarter?
It seems like they got hit with a few challenges all at once.
Oh, no.
Had some delays in accessing that high-grade ore that they were expecting. Some equipment issues popped up. And they had to deal with some pretty rough weather.
Yeah, sometimes, you just can't plan for everything.
You can't control the weather.
Right. You can't control the weather. You really can't. And it makes you realize, there's so many moving parts in these mining operations.
Yeah, and something that happened way back in the beginning of the year, a damaged excavator.
Oh, wow.
Really kind of set them back, and that had like a ripple effect.
I see.
On their operations, and then that impacted how much high-grade ore they were able to access in Q3.
So it's like one problem led to another.
Yeah, domino effect.
Yeah. Well, let's shift gears then to the positive. We got Masbate and Otjikoto. They were like the stars this quarter.
The overachievers.
Yeah, what were they doing right?
At Masbate, they saw a higher mill throughput.
And remind me what that means.
That just means they're able to process more ore.
Yeah.
And they also had better than expected grades of gold in the ore that they were mining.
So those two things combined.
Yeah, that leads to a boost in production for sure.
Okay.
And then Otjikoto, similar story, higher mill feed grade.
Okay.
And that's referring to the concentration of gold in the ore that they're processing.
Gotcha.
They had an increased throughput, which allowed them to exceed their production targets. And then they had some good news from their Wolfshag underground mine as well.
Okay, I'm listening.
So this underground mine at Otjikoto actually exceeded its daily production target, which is pretty impressive when you think about underground operations.
Yeah, it's a lot more challenging, right?
A lot more challenging, yeah.
Yeah, so that's good news. Now let's move on to the financial side of things. B2Gold reported a net loss per share this quarter. But then also in the report, it talks about adjusted net income.
Yeah.
Can you help me understand this? What's going on there?
Yeah. So while a net loss might, sound kind of alarming, it's important to look at the context.
Okay.
So a large part of this loss was due to what's called a non-cash impairment charge.
Okay.
So essentially, this is a paper loss that doesn't really directly impact their everyday cash flow.
Okay, so not as bad as it initially sounds.
Not as bad, no. And this particular charge was related to their Goose project in Canada, which we'll talk about more later.
Okay.
But the key takeaway here is that their adjusted net income, which excludes this non-cash charge, was actually positive. So it suggests that their core mining operations are still generating profits.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
I also noticed in the report that there was mention of tax audits.
Uh-huh.
What's going on with that?
It seems that they had some tax accruals related to their agreement with the state of Mali.
Okay.
So that also impacted their reported income.
Yeah.
This is, a specific situation related to their Mali operations.
So the takeaway is, even though they reported a net loss, their fundamental business, their mining operations are still doing well.
Yeah, it's an important distinction.
Yeah, okay. Now let's talk about this Goose project.
Yeah.
Because it seems to be playing a big role in their financial picture.
It is.
So what's the latest?
The good news is that construction on the Goose project is proceeding on schedule.
Okay, good.
And they're still aiming for that first gold pour in the second quarter of 2025.
That's exciting. A brand new mine coming online.
Yeah.
But there must be more to this story because you mentioned that impairment charge earlier.
You're picking up on everything.
Yeah, well, got to read between the lines sometimes.
Exactly. So they did have to increase their capital expenditure estimate for the Goose project. It's now up to 1,540 million Canadian dollars.
Wow, that's a pretty big increase. What's driving that?
Well, a few things. B2Gold emphasized that they're focused on building a really reliable and de-risked operation.
Okay.
They've kind of taken a proactive approach.
Uh-huh.
They've sped up certain equipment purchases so that ensures that they can, ramp up those mining activities quickly. They're building additional infrastructure like warehousing, maintenance facilities, even expanding their camp facilities. And they've also accelerated the design of a reverse osmosis plant to improve their water management.
So they're willing to spend more upfront
Yeah.
to really make sure this project is successful.
Long-term vision, right.
Yeah, and it tells you something, too, about their confidence in the mine.
Absolutely. And, this project has the potential to be a significant gold producer. They're projecting annual production of over 310,000 ounces from 2026 to 2031.
Wow, okay.
So, yeah.
So they're in it for the long haul.
Long game.
That puts that increased investment into perspective. Sometimes you gotta spend money to make money.
That's right.
All right, so that's the Goose project. It's not their only project. They've got some other things in the works as well.
They do.
What else is going on?
Well, they've got this Gramalote project in Colombia,
Okay.
which recently completed a preliminary economic assessment.
Okay.
And the results were actually really encouraging.
Oh, good.
It looks like it could potentially be a low-cost gold mine.
Low cost. I like that.
Always good news.
What's the timeline looking like for this one?
They've already started a feasibility study,
Okay.
which is, a big step forward. And they've also commenced resettlement and coexistence programs in the area.
Okay, so they're taking their social and environmental responsibilities seriously.
Absolutely. Shows their commitment to responsible mining practices, which are really important nowadays.
For sure. Okay, and what about that exploration in Namibia?
Yeah, they're pretty excited about this area called the Springbok Zone at their Ajikoto mine. And this is part of a larger discovery called the Antelope Deposit. And get this, they think this could potentially extend the mine's life all the way through 2031.
Wow, so they're breathing new life into an existing mine.
Yeah, potentially a game changer for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so we've talked about production.
Uh-huh.
We've talked about a couple of their key projects.
Yep.
Let's take a step back and kind of look at the big picture. What's the overall outlook for B2Gold based on all this?
I'd say it's kind of a two-sided coin, right?
Okay.
On the one hand, they are facing some, short-term challenges, mainly due to those setbacks at Fekola
Right.
and, those increased costs at the Boost project.
But on the other hand,
they do seem to be well-positioned for long-term growth.
Okay.
Once the Goose project is operational, that'll be, a major contributor to their production. And if Gramalote and Antelope prove successful,
Yeah.
their future looks really bright.
So a couple bumps in the road, but ultimately headed in the right direction.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, good. And, they're still focused on maximizing production from those existing mines.
Yeah.
Yeah, keeping their finances in order, always looking for new opportunities. They mentioned that they're committed to returning capital to shareholders,
Yeah.
which is always good news for investors.
Always.
Okay. This has been a really, really insightful look
It has.
into B2Gold's current situation.
Mm-hmm.
You've given us a lot to think about. But before we move on, I can't help but wonder.
What are you wondering?
We've talked about their plans,
Right.
projections, but the gold market, it's so volatile.
Yeah.
And how might, global events and particularly geopolitical factors, how might those impact B2Gold's production costs and just their overall profitability?
That's a great question and a perfect segue, too.
Part 2. We'll be back in just a moment to tackle that very topic.
You're absolutely right. The gold market, it's influenced by so many global factors.
Yeah.
And understanding how those nuances can really help us, determine how B2Gold might be affected.
So let's talk geopolitics. What are some of the major players on the world stage that could have an impact here?
Well, first and foremost, we need to think about, the political situations in the countries where B2Gold operates.
Okay.
So that's Mali, Namibia, the Philippines, and of course soon to be Canada.
Right.
And each of those has its own kind of unique set of political risks and opportunities.
Yeah. Okay, well, since Mali is home to their flagship Fekola mine, let's start there.
Yeah.
I know the region has faced some political instability.
It has.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, Mali has seen a lot of challenges in recent years.
Yeah.
Military coups, ongoing security concerns.
Yeah, I've been reading about that.
Yeah, and that instability, it can have a direct impact on mining companies operating there.
How so?
Well, you can see disruptions in operations.
Mhm.
You could have increased security costs. You could even face challenges with, getting permits and
Yeah.
regulatory approvals.
And I would imagine that these types of disruptions, they could also affect investor confidence as well, which could potentially impact B2Gold's stock price.
Absolutely. Investors, they tend to get a little bit nervous
Right.
when there's uncertainty.
Of course.
They want to see stability, predictability, especially in an industry like mining that requires, a lot of capital investment.
So how is B2Gold navigating these challenges in Mali specifically?
Well, it's definitely a delicate balancing act.
Yeah. I bet.
They need to maintain good relationships with the government,
Mhm.
with local communities, while also ensuring the safety and security of their operations.
Yeah, it's a tough spot to be in. We saw in the report that they recently signed a memorandum of understanding
Yeah.
with the state of Mali to kind of, smooth things over.
Right, and that's a good sign.
Okay.
It shows that they're being proactive,
Right.
trying to find solutions, collaborating to address those concerns.
Yeah. Okay. So that's Mali. Let's move on to Namibia. That seems to be, a relatively stable country, especially compared to some others in the region.
Yeah, Namibia is generally considered politically stable,
Okay.
well-established mining sector. So the risks there are likely lower than in a place like Mali.
But there are always risks. Right.
Of course, yeah. No country is completely immune to political shifts or regulatory changes.
Right.
Even in Namibia, you could see changes to the mining code,
Yeah.
taxation policies. You could even see a rise in, what's called resource nationalism.
And remind me what that is again.
Yeah, that's when governments, they kind of assert more control over their natural resources,
Okay.
which can be a challenge for mining companies.
Makes sense. Now on to the Philippines.
Okay.
B2Gold's Masbate mine has been performing well. But I know there's been some environmental concerns
Yeah.
around mining in the country.
Yeah, the Philippines, they've really had to balance, their economic dependence on mining
Mm-hmm.
with the need for environmental protection.
Right.
There have been instances of mines being shut down because of environmental violations.
Oh, wow.
So that's something that, B2Gold really has to be mindful of.
So high environmental standards are going to be key to their success there.
Absolutely. It's not just about profits anymore. It's
Yeah.
about showing a genuine commitment to sustainability.
Absolutely. Okay, last but not least, Canada.
Okay.
B2Gold's Goose Project.
Yeah.
It's located in a remote region of the country.
Yeah.
What are some of the geopolitical factors to consider there?
Well, Canada is known for its political stability,
Right.
strong legal framework, which is, a big plus.
Yeah.
But there are definitely unique challenges when you're talking about mining in those remote areas,
Yeah.
especially up north.
Like what kinds of challenges?
Well, infrastructure can be a major hurdle.
Okay.
Transportation, energy, access to skilled labor, all of those things can, significantly increase project costs. And then you have to deal with, the harsh weather conditions.
Right. It's not exactly the most hospitable environment.
No, it's demanding.
Right.
It can lead to delays, expenses.
So they've really got to be on top of those logistical challenges
Yeah,
and also build, strong relationships with those local communities.
absolutely. And I think it's really important to remember, the indigenous communities in the area.
Of course.
Consulting with them, making sure their concerns are addressed. It's not just, the ethical thing to do. It's essential for, getting permits, maintaining what's called a social license to operate.
Right. Yeah. Makes
Yeah.
sense. So we've talked about the specific, geopolitical situations
Yeah.
in each of these countries.
Right.
But what about global events on a broader scale?
Mm.
How does those come into play?
So there are several kind of macroeconomic factors
Okay.
that can really impact the gold market and in turn B2Gold.
Okay.
One of the biggest ones is inflation.
Right, because gold is seen as kind of a hedge against inflation, right?
Exactly. When inflation rises, the purchasing power of currencies like the US dollar decreases.
Uh-huh.
And people, they tend to look to, assets like gold,
Okay.
which are seen as a safe haven,
Right.
a store of value.
So that increased demand can then push up the price of gold, which could benefit a company like B2 Gold.
Yeah, potentially,
Yeah.
but it's not always, a simple direct correlation.
Oh, okay. Explain that.
Yeah, so interest rates also play a role.
Mm-hmm.
So when central banks, they raise interest rates to combat inflation,
Right.
holding on to gold becomes, less attractive.
Okay, I see.
Because it doesn't generate any interest or dividends.
So it's this balancing act between inflation and interest rates
Exactly, yeah.
that can kind of, really influence the price of gold.
And then you also have, geopolitical events, things like wars, conflicts, political unrest in other parts of the world. These events often, create uncertainty and fear in the market.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And so investors, they look for safety in those assets, like gold.
So an increase in geopolitical risk could drive up gold prices.
It's a possibility, yeah. And then, on the flip side, if there's, a period of stability, relative global stability, economic optimism, the demand for gold could decrease.
Oh, okay.
And you could see lower prices.
It's a constantly shifting landscape.
It is.
All these different variables at play.
Lots of variables. And to make it even more complex, you also have to consider, the supply side of the equation.
Oh, right. We've been so focused on the demand and the price of gold, we haven't even talked about, what's happening with production.
Yeah, and gold mining is a global industry.
Wow.
So any disruptions to supply in major gold-producing countries, that can have a big impact.
So, for example, if there's a labor strike at a big gold mine in, let's say, South Africa,
Right.
that could send prices up.
Potentially, yeah. And the same goes for, political instability or regulatory changes in other major gold-producing regions.
So it's not just about what's happening with B2 Gold and the countries where they operate.
Right.
It's about, the entire global gold mining industry.
We're the big picture.
Yeah, the big picture.
And let's not forget about technological advancements.
Okay.
So new mining technologies and techniques, they can influence, production costs and efficiency,
Right.
which can have an indirect effect on prices.
So if there's a new technology that allows for, more efficient gold extraction,
Right.
that could increase the supply of gold.
It could, yeah.
Potentially put downward pressure on prices.
That's one scenario. And then, conversely, if there are technological setbacks or challenges in the industry, you could see the opposite effect.
Limited supply.
Limited supply and higher prices.
Man, it's a lot to keep track of.
It is.
It's like this giant puzzle.
Yeah, lots of interconnected pieces.
And to really analyze a company like B2 Gold, you really need to go beyond just their financial statements.
Yeah.
You got to understand all these broader geopolitical and economic forces.
Exactly.
It's about seeing that big picture, understanding how all these factors can interact and influence the company's performance.
Absolutely. And speaking of the big picture, there's kind of another layer of complexity that we need to consider. And that is the increasing focus on ESG factors.
Right. Environmental, social, and governance.
You got it.
Yeah. And, investors are paying more attention to these issues than ever before.
Absolutely.
So how does ESG fit into, B2 Gold's story?
Well, historically, the mining industry hasn't had, the best reputation when it comes to environmental and social impacts.
Right.
So investors today, they're looking for companies that are, taking concrete steps to address these issues, demonstrating a real commitment to responsible practices.
So it's not just about how much gold B2 Gold can dig up.
Right.
It's about how they're doing it.
Exactly. And B2 Gold, they seem to be aware of this shift.
Okay.
In investor sentiment. They've highlighted their commitment to responsible mining, community engagement, environmental stewardship.
Right. And we saw some examples of that with like those resettlement and coexistence programs they're implementing in Colombia.
Absolutely. That's a good example. They've also been, investing in renewable energy sources.
Right. Yeah, we talked about that solar plant expansion at Fekola.
Exactly. So those are all, positive steps that could really give them a competitive advantage when it comes to attracting investors who prioritize ESG.
So being a responsible miner is not just, the right thing to do.
Right.
But it's actually becoming increasingly important for their financial success as well.
It is, yeah. Investors are starting to view ESG factors as a way to reduce risk and enhance long-term value.
So B2 Gold needs to really keep up with those evolving expectations.
They do. And they also need to be prepared to adapt, to potential changes in regulations, reporting requirements related to ESG. It's a dynamic landscape.
For sure.
And those companies that can effectively manage those factors will be, better positioned for success.
Yeah. Wow. You've given us a lot to think about.
It's a lot.
From those specific political risks in each country where B2Gold operates,
right,
to the broader global macroeconomic trends.
Yeah.
And the growing importance of ESG.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a lot on their plate.
It is, but navigating these complexities, that's, it's all part of being a successful mining company in today's world.
So it sounds like they're making an effort to address these challenges.
Yeah.
But of course, only time will tell.
Right.
How effectively they can actually execute their plans.
Yeah.
And adapt to this ever-changing landscape.
That's the key. And that brings us to another kind of crucial element of B2Gold's strategy, something that could have, a really big impact on their future, and that's their exploration and development pipeline.
Right, yeah. We touched on a few of their projects.
You did.
But I'd love to hear more about what they have in the works.
Yeah.
Can you kind of tell us about their exploration activities?
Well, one of the things that really sets B2Gold apart, I think, is their dedication to exploration.
Okay.
They're constantly looking for new deposits to replenish their reserves and extend the life of their mines.
It's like the lifeblood of a mining company, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. If you're not finding new deposits, you're basically, a shrinking asset.
Right.
And B2Gold, they seem to understand that.
Yeah.
They've allocated, a lot of resources to exploration.
Yeah.
They have a pretty impressive track record.
Yeah, I mean, we saw that with the Antelope deposit.
Exactly.
Potentially adding, 7 years to the Ochikoto mine.
Yeah. And then they've got, those other promising projects.
Like Gramalote in Colombia.
Right.
Which could be, a big low-cost producer.
So exploration is key to their long-term growth strategy.
Yeah, major piece of the puzzle.
And by discovering new deposits, developing new mines, they can diversify their portfolio,
right,
mitigate the risks of relying on any one single asset.
Absolutely.
And potentially boost, their overall production and profitability.
Yeah. So it's not just about, getting everything they can out of those existing mines.
Right.
It's about always looking for the new opportunities.
Right. Okay, so what else is B2Gold doing to kind of ensure their future success beyond exploration?
Well, they're investing in, those technological advancements.
Right.
That can really enhance efficiency.
Yeah.
Reduce costs.
We talked about the impact of new technology on the gold market earlier.
We did.
But how is B2Gold specifically using it?
Well, they're exploring things like automation, data analytics, even artificial intelligence to optimize their mining process. So they're really trying to make their mines smarter.
Yeah, smarter and more efficient.
Okay.
So, they're experimenting with things like autonomous trucks, drilling equipment, to reduce labor costs, improve safety. And then, data analytics can help them make, smarter decisions about where to explore, how to get the most out of their mining operations.
Yeah, so it's about using that data to kind of identify those patterns and trends that might not be obvious just, looking at it with the naked eye.
Yeah, exactly. And that can lead to, more targeted exploration, improved resource recovery.
Okay.
And even, a reduced environmental footprint.
So working smarter, not harder.
Well said.
What else?
Well, another key aspect is, their emphasis on financial discipline, maintaining a strong balance sheet.
Right. And mining's a capital-intensive industry.
Very much so.
You need a lot of cash on hand to, develop new projects, handle those ups and downs of the market.
And B2Gold has a track record of, prudent financial management.
Okay.
They've kept their debt levels relatively low. They've generated strong cash flow from their operations.
And they're still committed to returning capital to shareholders.
Exactly, which is always a good sign.
Yeah, always good.
It shows they're confident in their ability to generate cash and, create value for their shareholders.
So financial discipline isn't just about being, cheap or frugal.
Right.
It's about making smart investments.
Yep.
Managing risk effectively, making sure they have the resources to achieve those growth goals.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And that leads us to another important aspect of their strategy, and that is their approach to mergers and acquisitions.
Right. Acquiring other companies.
Yeah.
A way to expand their portfolio.
It can be.
Gain access to new resources, new regions.
Exactly. And B2Gold has a history of making, these strategic acquisitions. They've carefully chosen companies that align with their overall strategy.
So not just acquiring any company.
No, it has to be the right fit.
Right.
They've been really focused on, acquiring assets in politically stable jurisdictions,
Makes sense.
favorable mining regulations,
Yeah.
mitigating that risk,
Right.
making sure their investments are protected.
And also probably looking for, assets that kind of complement their existing portfolio.
Absolutely. So, geographically or in terms of the types of deposits that they're targeting.
Diversification.
Crucial, spreading that risk across different regions, different types of deposits,
Right.
makes them less vulnerable to any one event or market fluctuation.
Don't put all your eggs in one basket.
Exactly.
Yeah.
B2Gold seems to be taking that advice to heart.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about exploration, technology, financial discipline, mergers and acquisitions. What's the overall takeaway from all this?
Well, it seems like, B2Gold has a clear strategy to set themselves up for, that long-term success.
Even with the short-term challenges that we talked about.
Yeah, even with those,
Okay.
they're investing in exploration,
Uh-huh.
embracing technology, maintaining that financial discipline,
Right.
and strategically acquiring those assets.
So it's like a multifaceted approach to, this complex industry.
It is.
Yeah.
And it seems to be working for them.
Okay.
Their stock price has remained relatively stable
Uh-huh.
despite all the volatility.
Sounds like they're doing a lot of things right.
Yeah, I think they are. It will be interesting to see how they continue to execute
Yeah.
and adapt.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive
Yeah, it has.
into B2Gold. You've given us a really comprehensive understanding of their business, their challenges, their strategies for success. But before we wrap up this part of our conversation, I have one final question.
Okay, shoot.
We've talked a lot about, their financial performance,
Yeah.
their growth plans. But what about their commitment to, sustainability and responsible mining? Is this just talk?
Right.
Or are they actually walking the walk?
Yeah, that's a crucial question.
Yeah.
And one that deserves further exploration.
So you know what that means.
Another deep dive.
Exactly. Stay tuned, everyone. We'll be right back with part 3, where we take a closer look at B2Gold's sustainability initiatives. And we're going to evaluate their commitment to those responsible mining practices. Okay, so we're back for the final part of our B2Gold deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, their financials, their growth strategy, the whole geopolitical landscape.
It's a lot.
It is. But now let's talk about something that's, really becoming vital for any company these days, especially in mining, and that's sustainability.
Yeah, for sure. Sustainability, it's not just a buzzword anymore. It's really a core part of, responsible business. And I think it's especially true for a mining company like B2Gold, operating in these diverse and often sensitive environments. Their approach to sustainability can really make or break them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's get specific. What are they actually doing to demonstrate that they're serious about sustainability?
Well, they've got this comprehensive sustainability framework
Okay.
that covers, a pretty wide range of areas.
Like what?
Everything from environmental stewardship to community engagement to ethical governance, the whole ESG spectrum.
Okay, well, let's start with the environmental piece then. Mining, it's an industry that inherently impacts the environment.
It does.
So how are they working to kind of mitigate those impacts?
Well, they've got a lot of initiatives aimed at, minimizing their environmental footprint.
Okay.
One example is their commitment to responsible land management. So that includes, progressively reclaiming areas that have been mined.
Okay.
And they're also really focusing on reducing their greenhouse gas emissions.
Right, and we talked about that in the report. They're expanding the solar power capacity
Yep.
at the Fekola mine. That's going to be a huge step in the right direction.
It is, yeah. Reducing reliance on fossil fuels.
Right.
Big impact on their carbon footprint.
Yeah.
Plus, it can save them money over the long term.
There you go. Win-win.
Exactly.
Now, what about water usage? Because mining operations can use a lot of water.
They do, yeah. Water stewardship is a big deal. And B2Gold's implemented measures to, conserve water.
Okay.
And minimize their impact on local water resources.
Right. And they mentioned that they're accelerating the design of a reverse osmosis plant at the Goose Project.
Right. Yeah.
Why is that so important?
So reverse osmosis, it's a water purification technology that lets them basically treat and reuse water more efficiently.
Okay.
And that's especially important in those areas where water is scarce.
Makes sense.
Like that remote area where the Goose Project is located.
Okay, so they're really trying to minimize that strain
Yeah.
on the local water supply.
For sure.
But, environmental stewardship is only one piece of the sustainability puzzle.
Right.
What about their relationships with the communities around their mines?
Yeah, that's where, the social aspect of sustainability really comes in.
Right.
And Beat Gold, they get it. They understand that being a good neighbor, contributing to the well-being of those communities, that's a responsibility.
And we saw some examples of that in the report, the resettlement and coexistence programs in Colombia.
Yeah, those are great examples.
Can you tell us more about those?
Yeah, so those programs, they're designed to ensure that the mine is developed in a way that respects, the rights and the livelihoods of the local people.
Okay.
So the resettlement program, it helps relocate people who are, directly affected by the mine.
Okay.
And the coexistence program that's aimed at finding ways for the mine to operate alongside, those existing communities and activities like small-scale mining.
It's all about balance, right?
It is.
Between that economic development and the community well-being.
And recognizing that mining can't happen in a vacuum.
Yeah.
It has to be done in a way that benefits, all those involved.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so it sounds like they're really making an effort to engage with communities, address their concerns. But what about the G in ESG?
Oh, the governance.
Yes, governance.
Yeah.
What are they doing to, make sure everything is ethical and transparent?
Yeah. So governance, that's all about, how a company operates, its leadership, its decision-making, commitment to ethical conduct. And B2Gold has adopted a number of practices to promote good governance.
Such as?
So they have a diverse and independent board of directors, which provides oversight and accountability.
Yeah.
They've got a comprehensive code of conduct.
Okay.
Outlines those ethical principles, the expectations for employees, contractors.
Setting a high standard.
Yeah, setting the bar high.
Okay.
And they're also committed to transparency in their reporting. So they publish these detailed sustainability reports, which give stakeholders, that insight into their performance, their progress on ESG.
So it's not just saying the right things.
Right.
They're actually measuring it.
Yeah.
Reporting on it.
They're walking the walk.
Yeah, that's key.
Absolutely.
For building trust.
It builds trust, accountability. It shows that they're taking it seriously.
So to bring it back to the question I asked earlier, is this all just talk, or are they genuinely walking the walk when it comes to sustainability?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And it's not, an easy yes or no answer.
Right. It's complex.
It is.
It's nuanced.
And there's always room for improvement.
Right.
And every company, no matter how well-intentioned, is going to face, challenges, make mistakes.
Absolutely.
But the key thing is, are they putting in the effort?
Right.
Are they trying to improve?
And it seems like B2Gold is.
Yeah, from what we've seen, it seems like they are making a real effort to incorporate sustainability into their operations.
They're investing in those renewables, engaging with those communities, promoting ethical governance, being transparent about their progress.
Yeah, they're ticking a lot of the boxes.
Yeah.
And, while there will always be critics,
of course,
and those who, want more, it's important to acknowledge the progress that they are making.
Yeah, and it's important for us as investors, as consumers, to keep asking these questions.
Absolutely.
Hold companies accountable.
Keep them on their toes.
Yeah, exactly.
Sustainability, it's not a destination. It's a journey.
Well said.
And it takes a collective effort. Companies, investors, society.
Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive into B2Gold. I think we've learned a lot about their business, their challenges, their strategies for success. And, we've also learned that sustainability, it's not just a nice to have anymore.
It's not.
It's really becoming crucial.
Yeah.
For long-term value creation in this industry.
Absolutely. Companies that embrace sustainability, they're not just doing the right thing. They're setting themselves up for a brighter future.
Yeah, for sure. So as we wrap up, it leaves us with one final thought-provoking question.
Yeah.
How can we, as individuals, as a society, encourage and support those companies that are truly committed to, sustainable and responsible practices? That's a question we're thinking about as we, continue to navigate the challenges of this century.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into B2Gold. Hopefully you found it as insightful as we did. And we'll see you next time for another exploration into the world of mining.